how we looking? Okay, I think everything's good. Everything should be set nice and neat. We could probably extend this so you can see a little bit of my palette. Okay, welcome to my 51st watercolor tutorial. This is the first day of no work for school teachers in Louisiana Parish due to the coronavirus pandemic. This is the second painting tutorial I'm doing today. I had done one this morning at about 8:30. I'm getting a lot of stuff done. I was feeling kind of restless, mowed some lawns, did some mowing, worked on some fountain pens, did the video, etc. And now it's the evening, and I just tore a sheet of Stonehenge Aqua into quarters for us to paint. I'm saturating this paper. We are going to set up the palette while this stretches. We'll come up with a plan. I think I do have a plan for this one. I'm not sure if I've done this before, so I apologize in advance. It may be a concept that I've either talked about in just a picture or in a previous video, but let's see if I can do this. I thought that I would talk about perspective, but a different aspect of perspective. The last perspective video we did was with a waterway going back into it, and then I think we had talked about one with angles and whatnot. This one, we'll talk about trees mainly, and the base of the trees themselves. And while this soaks, I'm going to move this to the side and kind of sketch out the concept. I don't have a, I do have a pad right here. Okay, so with this, and I'll use the dot matrix on here as an assisted tool with it. I'm not sure how big it'll show up, but we have the dots, and here is our paper. Here is our horizon line. In general, we could think about it like this. At the horizon line, objects are going to seem smaller. So maybe we can do a half dot up, half dot down. So anything in that range, far distance, we could have trees up to that height, maybe a little bit of variation. Then, as things get closer, maybe we could do a full dot length, okay, a little bit longer. And we could think about clouds falling into that vertical height. We can think about tree bases starting at that distance. Okay, that was that one down there. Then, at this next dot, we could have the tree bases come closer. Now, if we did a full kind of dot length there, we're going to have to go longer with it and have trees start closer here. So the main gist of it is we have a narrower band, a band that's going to get wider, and a band that's going to get even wider as things come closer to us. So we're going to want to keep that in mind as we paint. Same thing with clouds. Narrow, and they can get bigger, and then we have the big ones that get overhead. And just that simple playing around alone will give you a key addition to your perspective. So I'm going to try to make up a scene as we paint. while we keep that in mind. Okay. Our paper's saturated. It looks like it wants to flatten out. And like I said, we're going to keep that theme of that perspective taking place. So feel free to follow along, feel free to watch. Of course, I have a whole bunch of links down below. I can't promise this painting will come out good or anything like that, but we're going to focus on that perspective aspect. So what I'm going to do is grab some alizarin crimson. I think I'm just going to rely on just my basic palette, kind of the Ron Ranson palette, and I'll talk through the colors as I use them, and we'll go from there. Okay, so we have a narrow band. Okay. Let's get some raw sienna. Making this a little bit bigger than the band for the red. Now I'll mix in some ultramarine. I may have to clean my brush off, we'll see, because I'm getting a little bit purpley. I want it to kind of go through the rainbow, like kind of Roy G. Biv going up. In fact, what we should do is kind of do an as above, so below type thing, and then we'll change our colors as we do the land. It's kind of reflective back and forth. All right. Ultramarine with the raw sienna, so we're gonna have a bigger band up here. Just gonna put some breaks in this, and then ultramarine, and we'll go with that alizarin crimson and get a purple. Okay, so you can put some variety in here. We can grab some Payne's Gray for that very dark spot. If we want to put clouds in, this is a Payne's Gray in here. Our far distant clouds are going to be thin and narrow. Clouds closer, we'll use that concept of them being vertically larger. And then we can do the clouds that get very close and how much bigger they are. And we'll leave this guy at that. Now we'll do the same thing with the ground, and then we'll apply trees. You just get a little stretching to take place here. With this, I'm going to start with the Venetian red. If you don't have that, you can use light red. Mix that into the ultramarine just for a purple. So this is our horizon line. And that's kind of our first thin, narrow distance. Then I am going to bring it closer. Here you could play with aerial perspective and warm colors and cool colors as it comes closer. So I'm mixing in some raw sienna. This is going to be a wider band. In fact, I'm just going to take the brush like that just to demonstrate how it'd be wider. And then we can take burnt sienna into that and bring that super wide. Okay. Now let's go in and start playing with trees. We'll put some distant masses in. I'm going to go back to my light red ultramarine mix, and I'm going to dab some on that far distance back here. Aerial perspective wise and tonality wise, this might be a little too dark. You may want it to be lighter and help them recede, but this is kind of just demonstrating how object at this distance could fall in that narrow band of size. And you can go above and below that a little bit for variety. And I'm going to darken it up for the next layer, just mixing some burnt umber. And this is going to overlap those further ones, so you can see how the base is starting down here and we covering a larger potential range vertically. This may be larger than it should be, so it's bringing it closer very quickly. Then I'm going to darken it up some more. Bases. I'll come with another line right here. Now this is going to be a big closer image. I could have also put another layer down here, and those guys are going to be even vertically taller than those. So I think that right there hopefully demonstrates the concept I was trying to show with the drawing in the beginning, how our clouds are going to get larger as they come closer, and our tree masses are going to get larger. They're going to overlap. The base is going to drop a little bit lower as objects come closer, and that's critical for building up kind of a dense forest or a tree line. And now that we have that whole concept out of the way, let's play around with this and see where we can actually go with it. I wound up making a path right in here, so I just wet the paper, wet the brush, and try to pick up a little bit of that pigment. Maybe we'll make a waterway, maybe we'll make a little swamp concept, maybe we'll get some reflections in there. Let's just grab a little bit of ultramarine. Put that in some water. I switched the brush, flipped the brush over just now, and I'd gotten more pigment down on it. I didn't mean to. I would think that as I got closer, I would have a stronger ultramarine pigment, but it does seem to look relatively nice the way that plays out. I think I will switch to the rigger at this point for a bit and play around and work my way from the back forward with concepts of trees and different masses. Just make things interesting and fun. That was an accident. You could dab accidents out. You could also use paper towels to lift out trees, clouds, sorry. Let's put some Payne's Gray. And if we wanted to give a concept of depth back there, I can drop it a little bit lower than those further ones, and we get that play with the tonality between them that helps this one come forward a little bit more. But You just want to be careful with that. You really don't want too dark in that background. Okay, now let's do this one line, and then I'll have another line come over it. Let's just drag these guys up and play around with it. Okay. I'm still wet and wet, so we can do that. And then put some Payne's Gray down here for our last tree. So let's do a dry off so that we can put another tree line right there, and bring it up in front of these. You can see how you could scrape at this point or get some texture back there. Somebody had asked me if we do that line, this layer, and we get the whites there with the scraping, and then we were to do some more trees on top, we would cover up the whites and the scrapes, and that's fine. We want to get a layering of those lines. Like here, I scraped that line out. If we have trees in front of it, we're only going to catch a part of it. So we're kind of building up with the fast and loose the idea that that's there, and then covering part of it. And it's like following through whenever you throw a baseball or anything like that. You don't see the follow through, but it's integral. I think it's important to the part. So I'm going to dry it off, and then we'll go to the next step. All right, so it's not completely dry, but it's fine at this point. One thing that I think about often that I do not express in these videos that I've been meaning to, right now I'm just mixing burnt sienna and ultramarine just to get a dark for the trees here, is that I always want to try to keep a sky holes within the trees. And here, that alizarin we use looks really beautiful. But with the layering, it's back there, but we might not see it. But I would really like to try to leave holes open in this so we can kind of catch that. And in the real world, you're going to have so many layering of branches and twigs and foliage that you really don't catch too much of it. I switched over to the rigger. I felt that the hake was just a little too thick right now. So just grabbing a mixture of that burnt sienna and ultramarine. We can grab Payne's Gray. We can kind of grab just any darks. I'm just going to vary whatever's on the brush. And I think that variation ultimately will help us out as well. Here you might see that far softening right there, and we're moving over it with this texture. So that's what I mean with the layering of those lines and movement, and that'll help create depth. With this one, as we come forward, we can drop that line a little bit where they're all coming from, and that is that assists the perspective aspect of it. It does help to kind of ground these guys. That's something that I kind of do with just trees in general, and leaving a little bit of that. I think we used raw sienna back in here. Even a little bit of that mixture to show through will make it interesting and give a feel for that depth. Unfortunately, I splattered some paint. Maybe we'll turn them into birds later on. I'm leading it off the edge. This spot would definitely be covered with the matte, but that's also kind of just adding to that concept I talked about earlier with following through. And even though you're not going to see it, put it there and know that it's there. Bring it down a little bit of shadow, reflection in the water. I don't like to do perfect reflections. I think that's a personal preference, but I did come across it in a book once where if you do a perfect reflection, you're essentially making two images in one painting, and that can really, like you have two paintings in one, and it kind of can cause an issue. I like to put paint spray around that water line. And I could just take wet brush to move that down. And now we could do another line right here where I just wet it, and do another line of that buildup of that foliage and trees. So let's do a dry off so you can see that progression take place. So, this is going to be the closer ones. Here, I'm going to try to get it just more concentrated pigment so we can get that darker tonality as well. So, you're going to have to kind of work with those two aspects whenever you're doing perspective, even though we're kind of focusing on just the placement and the size. And these guys are going to extend above. Now's a good time to mention that I have a whole bunch of links down below. I have a Patreon if you're interested in that. I do try to do a little bit of Patreon exclusive content, but I do try to provide a lot of free content on YouTube. So, if you're feeling generous, feel free to send something my way. I also have the Etsy account if you're ever interested in these paintings. I try to post them on there for sale. I have the Instagram account, which, I'll post my paintings on there as well. I do the oil paintings, but I don't Usually I don't do tutorials for those yet. I just can't figure out how to set up the camera for it. And I just do those sitting in my living room at the coffee table. I'm going to cut across in front of this, so we do see that sky back there, but it's not going to, it would never be that perfect opening all the way through all those objects unless we actually create a path, which is something that we can try to do down the line. Create kind of one of those paths that the animals would take to get to the water itself. If you go out in the woods and if you go down here in the marsh and the swamp and all that, you can find those paths really easily. It's always kind of cool. Hopefully during this unintended break, I'll be able to go out and do some bow fishing and all that. And when I go out, I'll have my phone with me, but I'll try to maybe bring a camera and take some reference photos for y'all as well. So we're just building this up. We could get a little bit vibrant with the colors that we put in here and whatnot. And here we're going to have our foliage as well. Thinking about this, we could have this line right here. We could have had foliage that matches up with it. Or we could think of this as a wall, meaning that it's just grass that's coming up at us. In this case, I'm going to use the side of the rigger. And I'm just using kind of that watery mix, water dipping into the paint to give that vertical wall of grass. And then we'll put a closer big old tree. We'll have a lot more reflections than we do right here. I do need to kind of just throw a little bit more in there, I think. We just got to be careful because that's starting to encroach on the perspective of the water opening up as we come here. So I may have to do a little bit of lifting just to soften that. Okay, and that's what that was. So I kind of mumbled through that. What happened was I was darkening that so much that it was narrowing this part of the water, and that affected the perspective of the water narrowing as we got back. So I dabbed it back to lighten that up some, to help open that up more. So look and see how those shapes relate to each other. Okay, I can use thin branches like I did here, or I could do a big main tree. Thinking with this one, we're going to continue with this kind of wispy aspect. So this is just a mixture of Payne's Gray, Ultramarine, and the Burnt Sienna, which that's going to be a color triad I'll do for a video for y'all. And we'll talk about kind of pushing it back and forth. And now, what I want you guys to take away, if you've gotten to this point in this video, is that a lot of these times I'm just making up the composition as I go, and that's either from, and I really don't know what that stems from. It might be from having seen a lot of things in life, being, like I said, out in the swamp, or when I lived up in the Northeast, and I was in Boy Scouts and camping and hiking and all those type of things. You see a lot of different views. But then within painting itself, you start to see a lot of the same compositions and themes and motifs and whatnot. So as you guys practice and as you paint more and more, it'll get to you if you're having trouble with coming up with stuff. I don't know if I mentioned, but you are more than welcome to follow along with these videos. And you know what, if you do follow along and somebody's like, hey, I like that, you want to take like $20 for it, feel free to sell that painting. You have my permission, if you follow along and somebody wants to buy it from you. But yeah, as you paint, as you look at art books, as you explore art, you'll start building a repository, I guess, mentally of compositions and shapes and ideas. This I believe they would call this an S-shaped composition, where we're coming through right like that. And that's another possible video talking about all the different compositional shapes. I'll have to do research and actual preparation for that one. Oh, and I was starting that aside with the concept of a lot of these, I label them as experiments for you all and for myself. If you're going to paint fast and loose, have fun with it and paint that fast and loose. You can start off slow with it, kind of like where your musical scales and all that, or handwriting, where you want to start off slow and just get through the motions. Because if you rush through it, you're going to get not the best results. Though it's not the results that are important, it's the process and the learning that takes place. So paint as much as you can, experiment as much as you can. Don't be afraid to try something out and do something. Like if we're like, okay, with this one, let's put a little bit of alizarin crimson on our hake and do a dry brush across the sky and see how it affects it. You don't have to be afraid to do something like that. You might really like the results. I'm rambling, I apologize. Okay, so I think this hopefully will help you all with the concept of perspective and layering foliage and trees and growth to help create the illusion of depth in fast and loose paintings. In a moment we'll do a dry off. We'll probably sign it and leave it at that. If you wanted to, you could take a hake and you could put a little bit, I'll demonstrate that right now. Take the hake, kind of let it get dry. Let it get all splayed out. You can add a little bit of fuzzies to either get the illusion of small branches in there or a little bit of foliage left. You can, and this is just experimenting right here. I'm sure it's something that I've done in the past, but we're just doing a little bit of swiping motion, see if we can get that texture in there. And that's what I mean. If you're going to paint fast and loose, you're going to have to explore and experiment. Watercolor is fantastic because we have such a thin sheet of paper. Granted, I have stacks of finished paintings, But if this was canvas, if this was oil, you know, it just wouldn't be feasible to, or at least I can't imagine. I'm sure that there's people that can and have room for it, or they paint over their oil paintings. And we should even grab a little bit of that wet paint like we did right there and add texture and add movement and liven things up. You know, even though this is kind of a I guess the best word would be to say like a dead type scene. It's winter, it's fall. You can still put movement and get the air moving around. So let me dry this off. We'll put a mat on it and we'll sign it. Alright. Put this on top. I'll sign it and then I'll move the camera so we could all see it. Also, like I had mentioned earlier, this will be available on my Etsy account if you would like to check that out. That's Andrew B. Watercolors on Etsy. Anywho, I hope you enjoyed. Like I said, feel free to follow along, like, subscribe, and etc. I'll see you soon.